6 of the craziest F1 title deciders. Here we are then, people, the end of the F1 season. One race to go, level on points between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. What better way to celebrate this than to take a look back at some of the craziest F1 title finales we've ever seen. 1950 Italian Grand Prix. Yep, the very first F1 season had a three-way battle for the championship between the Alfa Romeo drivers. Each team could have more than 2 cars back in the day. Juan Manuel Fangio led the way by 2 points and would win the title if he finished first or second, regardless of what his teammates achieved. The other 2 in the fight were Giuseppe Farina and Luigi Fagioli. Fangio looked to have it in the bag, taking pole position ahead of Ferrari's Alberto Ascari. However, it was Farina who took the lead off the line. On lap 21, the Ferrari's engine failed and Ascari then jumped in his teammate's car to rejoin the race. Yep, you could do that too. 2 laps later and Fangio looked to be out of the race as well with gearbox problems. This forced him to take over another teammate's car and dropped him down to 6th, swinging the title over to Farina. Fangio's luck then went from bad to worse as the Argentinian's engine blew and he retired for a second and final time. With no cars left to swap into, he had to watch as the door was left open for Farina to finish over a minute clear of Ascari to be crowned the first ever F1 world champion. 1976 Japanese Grand Prix. An F1 finale so good they made a film about it. The 1976 season finale saw Ferrari's Niki Lauda and McLaren's James Hunt separated by just 3 points in the standings. The fact that the fight was so close was shocking in itself because of Lauda's superhuman recovery after his horrific crash at the Nürburgring, which nearly killed him. Torrential rain poured down at the Fuji Speedway and having narrowly escaped with his life once before, Lauda judged the monsoon conditions to be too dangerous and bravely withdrew from the race on lap 2, leaving Hunt with a golden opportunity to take the title. Having led for much of the race, the title looked set for Hunt, until the track began to dry and Hunt's pace seemed to disappear, and he was soon overtaken by Patrick Depailler and Mario Andretti in quick succession. Hunt was then forced to pit with a puncture right at the end of the race, dropping him down to 5th and at that moment handing the title to Lauda on lap 70 of 73. In what was described as a red mist, Hunt drove like a man possessed. Assuming that all was lost, he pushed his fresh tyres as hard as they could go, passing Alan Jones and Clay Regazzoni to cross the finish line in 3rd. He'd managed to beat Lauda to the title by 1 point. A crazy finale. 1986 Australian Grand Prix. The 1986 title decider provided us with one of the greatest fights in F1 history, as 3 titans of the track had hopes of taking the championship. Nigel set a comfortable pole position before a poor start saw him drop down to 4th, as Piquet took the lead ahead of Ayrton Senna and Keke Rosberg. On lap 7, Rosberg passed Piquet for the lead and began to build a gap whilst Prost hunted down Piquet. Lap 23 saw Piquet go for a spin and Prost forced to pit due to a puncture. Both were able to recover, and with 25 laps to go, all 3 title contenders were running together when it became a battle for the lead after Rosberg suffered a right rear tyre failure. The drama wasn't over yet. On lap 64, Mansell's tyre exploded at 180 miles per hour, and with it, his chances of his first world championship. This turned the fight into a 2-horse race between Piquet and Prost. Having seen 2 drivers suffer tyre blowouts in quick succession, Williams were taking no chances and boxed Piquet for a change of tyres, thinking that the faster car would have enough time to catch up with the Frenchman. Unfortunately, that wasn't how it panned out. Despite closing the gap from 15 to 4 seconds, Piquet just couldn't catch him. Prost crossed the line to take the championship by 2 points and promptly pulled up a few yards after the line because he ran out of fuel. Irony is, if Mansell had hit the wall and covered the circuit in debris when he had his tyre blowout, the race would have been red flagged, and as they'd covered over 2/3 of the race distance, he'd have been crowned champion. 1994 Australian Grand Prix. Following the tragic death of Ayrton Senna at San Marino, Damon Hill found himself propelled into being Williams' team leader in his 2nd full season in F1. Taking 4 victories in 5 races saw him force Michael Schumacher into a winner-takes-all finale in Adelaide, trailing the Benetton by 1 point. Schumacher had the early advantage, inheriting the lead from Nigel Mansell, who got a slow start off the line. Lap 36 saw Schumi make a rare error, hitting the wall at the East Terrace corner and allowing Hill to pounce. The Williams switched at the last second to the inside into the next right-hander. Turning into the apex of the corner, Schumi clipped Hill's car and flung his own through the air, over to the tyre wall and straight into retirement. So, Hill won? Nope. The collision had caused just enough damage to Damon's suspension that Hill was forced to retire and secured Schumacher his first of 7 world titles. Schumacher and controversial season finales. Where have we heard that before? Maybe best not to mention how the 1997 season ended, or rather, just ask Jacques Villeneuve. 2008 Brazilian Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton came into the last race of the season needing 5th to secure his first world championship, but it wouldn't be anywhere near as easy as you'd think for a McLaren that had won 5 races coming into Interlagos. His championship rival was Felipe Massa, who was thriving on home soil, converting pole position to a dominant race lead. Hamilton's race, meanwhile, was anything but straightforward. The McLaren had been running within the top 5 for most of the race until a late rain shower threatened to undo all his hard work. As he and his fellow frontrunners pitted for intermediates to be safe, Toyota's Timo Glock decided to roll the dice and try to make it to the end on dry tyres, demoting Hamilton to 5th. With 3 laps remaining, Sebastian Vettel then overtook him. Sitting in 6th, all seemed to be lost as Massa reached the checkered flag and brought home the victory. Ferrari began celebrating, taking back-to-back titles, and Hamilton had to hope for some sort of miracle. Wait, is that Glock? Staying on his dry tyres backfired for Timo Glock as the rain intensified and he was forced to tiptoe his way around the track. At the final corner, on the final lap, even Netflix couldn't write this, Hamilton passed Glock, reclaiming 5th and more importantly snatching the title by a single point. Unbelievable. 2010 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. You think you're spoilt with Hamilton and Verstappen fighting it out for the title? Well, 2010 saw F1's first and only 4-way championship decider. The battle looked to be between Fernando Alonso and Mark Webber. The 2 contenders were separated by 8 points. Mathematically, Sebastian Vettel and Lewis Hamilton were also in with a shot. However, given that they were respectively 15 and 24 points behind Alonso, their chances were improbable, but not impossible. It helped that Vettel managed to secure his 10th pole position, having Hamilton for company on the front row. Alonso would line up 3rd, with Webber the furthest back title hopeful in 5th. Vettel and Hamilton got a solid getaway as Jenson Button passed Alonso for 3rd. Meanwhile, Webber brushed a little bit too close to the barriers and boxed early on lap 12 after struggling for grip on his super softs, dropping him down to 16th. Ferrari were fully focused on covering off Webber, so when Alonso had his own brush with the turn 19 barriers 4 laps later, they pitted him and plonked him right in the middle of traffic. The leaders out in front were setting better lap times than Alonso and Webber despite being on heavily worn softs. At the same time, for 37 laps, Alonso was stuck staring at the back end of Vitaly Petrov's Renault. A 3rd championship was beginning to slip through his fingers. Once again, the pit stops proved to be crucial. Vettel managed to prevent Hamilton's undercut from working and emerged 2nd behind Button, who had yet to box, with Hamilton falling down to 5th following his stop. The Brit then found himself having to deal with a troublesome Renault of his own, struggling to pass Robert Kubica, who'd been on the harder tyres for 40 laps. Button eventually pitted on lap 39 and the pendulum had firmly swung in race leader Vettel's favour. But it wasn't quite over yet. Finally in clean air, Hamilton set the fastest lap of the race and began to close on Vettel. However, it was too little too late as the Red Bull crossed the line to achieve his 5th win of the season as 2 McLarens completed the podium. And where were the 2 main title contenders? Alonso finished 7th ahead of Webber in 8th as their title dreams turned to dust. The underdog Vettel had pinched the 2010 title by 4 points, becoming the youngest F1 world champion in history and beginning the start of a new era in Formula 1. So there you have it, 6 of the greatest F1 title finales in history. Which do you think was the best, or was there one I missed out? Let us know in the comment section below.